Sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah, so my name's Katrin E. Parry. I'm studying music, composition, and technology for film and games. Um, and you are Benjamin Looms. Introduce yourself for my
Yep.
lecturers.
Benjamin Looms. I'm the original creator of Sirenscape, and I did the original coding, and I'm now the CEO and the creative director. I was responsible for sort of 100% of the sound design for the first couple of years, and then we've gradually sort of built a team of content creators around me, and yeah, having a grand time. Dungeons and Dragons player, Call of Cthulhu player, Star Wars
Nice.
player, computer game tragic, yeah, general geek to the max.
Cool. That's pretty cool. I play Dungeons and Dragons mainly. I don't think I've
hmm
I think my DM, my friend Adam, he lives with me. He has brought in some things from other places, like because it's all homebrew. So he's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I want to put in this monster from
yeah,
Pathfinder or whatever." So he
yeah,
does that, but the actual system we use is D&D. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They've done really well with fifth edition. It's nice and efficient and good for storytelling, and
yeah,
yeah, I really love it. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, look, I mean, if you're going to probably yeah, Call of Cthulhu, and there's a few other smaller games like Ten Candles, incredibly atmospheric storytelling game, which is amazing. Yeah, and sort of some other games that are specific to genres. So if you want to play in a particular world or something, they can be really fun as well. But yeah, kind of Dungeons and Dragons is my kind of
Mm.
stable center.
Yeah, it's very cool. I like it a lot. When
Mm,
I
mm,
was looking through your website, because obviously I'm a player, so I don't
mm,
tend to control the music.
mm,
That's all my dungeon master Adam. That's all he does. So I was looking through your website and I was just looking at all the D&D stuff, like and then
mm,
I spotted Matt Mercer. I was like
mm.
Matt Mercer on there, so I was like, maybe
Yeah,
I'll download that, buy
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Lots of fun. Yeah, it was really great getting him at the tent at Gen Con and getting him to
Mm.
to do some of the voices was super cool, and it makes a fun thing. I mean, it depends how people use it. Some people use those NPC sets to interact with, and or as a kind of a voice cue to get them into the voice acting themselves. Or yeah, it's very cool. But he did a great job with that one.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Mm.
um, so you're the CEO of Sirenscape, and you're also
hmm
one of the founders.
Hmm.
So you said you coded it yourself. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah. So I was the sole founder, in fact. So I was playing Dungeons and Dragons myself. Maybe I was playing Pathfinder at that point. Anyway, I started with third edition, and then D&D brought out fourth edition, and I popped over to Pathfinder because it was like like a kind of a 3.575 sort of edition, and
Mm.
playing that as a musician, and kind of thought it was weird having no music or sound at the table like you do in movies and
Mm.
television, and started sort of making CD tracks, I think it was, or MP3 tracks to
Nice.
play, and dumping sounds and music into like a sequencer, probably Cubase, and sort of aligning stuff out over time, and finding the repetition and the predictability. You know, humans are pattern discoverers, very quickly sort of noticing the same pattern every time I put on a certain ambience that I'd built in Cubase. So a 15-minute loop is not going to sort of cut.
Yeah.
It's not going to cut a realistic atmosphere when you're spending kind of 45 minutes in a town or whatever, negotiating with the locals.
Yeah.
I started trying to make my tracks longer and longer, and sort of dragging in sort of dog woofs and bird caws and sort of hawker shouts and things like that, and realizing that a computer could probably do that sort of automatically, and could even do some stuff like positioning and random volume and all that sort of stuff. So I got Python
Mm.
and used the game engine Pygame, which had some audio capabilities, and programmed a really basic version of a thing to pick up sounds, which all individual samples and individual music tracks, and play them kind of according to some fairly basic parameters. And
Nice.
just from my own table, basically. And I shared that online, and people were like, "Oh my god, I really liked it." And yeah, and sort of started making content and things like that. And people were then asking for it on iOS, and I want to run it on my iPad. So then I approached an entrepreneur that I was in association with through an arts project to see if he had some contacts of someone who might be able to help me translate it into the different languages and things. And then before I knew it, I was doing a sort of a business model about the audience size and potential for the business and all that sort of stuff. And that's when we then converted Sirenscape into what was just a passion project into well, it was still a passion project from what was just a home tinkering project into
Nice.
an actual company, and spent some money on dev and produced a real professional version of it. And that was
Nice.
probably in like 2013 or something that happened, that transformation, whereas the original version was written like maybe 2008 or 2009. So yeah, I
Nice.
wrote the original version and then was quite involved with the development and wrote some of the code in the new language, which was Unity.
Mm,
And definitely very involved, obviously, always with the sound design and the mathematics of all the algorithms and all that sort of stuff that keeps it
yeah.
sounding natural and realistic and non-repetitive and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Mm.
Nice. That's very cool. That's really
Mm.
cool.
It's a
Um,
pretty amazing journey.
yeah.
Surprising.
So is it so you said you use a game engine.
Yep.
What's the one that you use right now?
Now, so the Sirenscape is delivered in two different ways at the moment.
Mm,
The one that I mentioned before is Unity, which is like literally a game engine made to create three-dimensional, 3D first-person games where you walk around
yeah.
an environment. And we used that because you could basically create a listener, which we ended up standing still in the middle of the
Yeah.
environment, and then we could create sound objects in the 3D environment, sort of 20 feet away to the, to sort of the northwest, and 40 feet away to the northeast. I've got backwards. And then we could even do things like move those engines, those objects around, and we could apply reverb dynamically. So all that sort of stuff would all happen automatically, where if the sound's further away, you get more reverb and less of the original sound. And as you come closer, the reverse happens.
Mm,
And then we also then rewrote Sirenscape in the browser-based web audio API, which is what you'll see on the website as the web player. So that's actually playing directly in Chrome, and that became possible like just a couple of years ago. So now people don't even need to install any software or anything to get Sirenscape going. They can just use it straight in the Chrome browser on PC and Mac and some Androids, depending on the power of the machine. And so
mm,
that also then can do the similar stuff. We had to basically build kind of the 3D audio engine ourselves from that, where, you sort of do calculations to decide how reverby something is. And
mm,
the web audio API does cool things like convolution panning. So a lot of the positioning we experience, the apparent position of sound
mm.
in the world, is done by sort of phase shifting of arrival times of sounds to our ears. So
Nice.
if a crow calls over there, it actually arrives in my left ear just very, very slightly before my right ear. So there's not
Mm,
actually much of a volume difference between the loudness of the crow in my two ears. So
mm.
traditional panning basically turns down the sound more and more in my right ear as the apparent position we're wanting to imply goes more and more to the left. But
Yeah.
actual 3D positioning is about that sort of the timing of arrivals and echoes and things in the ears. So the web
Nice.
audio API does convolution panning and also convolution reverb, which gives an even more sense of immersion and realness, kind of that binaural kind of experience. So that's been pretty cool too. So
Yeah.
Unity, the advantage of Unity was we could deliver an app, a native app for iOS and Android and PC and Mac and Linux.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
people can still do that. That's why it's called Unity.
Mm,
And then now in the web audio API, and the advantage of that is you can just run it straight in a Chromium browser, so Firefox and Edge and Chrome, which is pretty cool too.
nice. That is pretty cool. That's very
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my final year of my undergrad right now, and we're learning about being able to simulate kind of what you were talking about, but we're not actually doing it in a 3D space. We're doing it using like Fmod. Um,
Yep.
uh,
Similar
and
machine. Yes.
yeah. So it's pretty cool. It's very cool hearing about how
Yeah.
you can use so many different things to get to like similar outcomes, which is
Yeah.
very cool.
That's right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's very cool.
Yeah. And look, ears are ready to create objects in space because that's what we're expecting to do.
Mm,
So you sort of your brain's always interpreting what we're hearing and sort of making deductions about the space that we're in, or the space the sound that we're hearing is in. So it's sort of there's all various different pathways to. Convolution panning is the most freaky thing in the world to me. I grew up, I studied decades ago, and reverb units then were about basically playing back lots of repetitions of the sound, like in a comb sort of sequence. Basically, you play the original sound and then you play you basically repeat the sound, repeat the sound, repeat the sound, repeat the sound, repeat the sound. But
mm,
now all we do is we like literally record a sweep, or a gunshot in an environment,
mm,
and get a recording of that. Essentially, remove the sweep, and then kind of essentially multiply our original sound. We convolve it by that recording, and then that produces what that sound would have sounded like in the environment, which is a fancy piece of mathematics, but it
yeah.
means we can capture all sorts of unique environments, and it's quite amazing.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Mhm.
I I spoke to someone from like one of my local churches, and they had someone come in with a microphone just in the middle of the
Yeah,
church, and
yeah, yeah.
they did that
Right.
exactly what you're talking about. It's very cool.
Mm.
They like
Yeah,
showed me the recordings. They like went in with a video camera just to see.
yeah,
It
yep, yep.
was
So
very
that's
cool.
right.
The
So
way that people do
yeah,
that is insane.
yeah. So you do that sweep, and then you deconvolve it, and you end up with this file, which is essentially sort of a recording of the most neutral sound possible playing in that environment. And then you literally take a dry recording, convolve it
Mm,
with that original recording, which you can do live, and you get the sound of that person standing in that environment, which is like, oh,
yeah,
that's so freaky, yeah, which is super
yeah.
cool.
It's very
Mm,
cool. That's very cool.
mm,
Um, yeah,
mm,
cool.
mm, mm, mm.
So, oh, that's yeah. My brain is exploding.
Sorry, I'm getting such long, complicated, interesting, geeky answers
No,
to your
that's so
question, which
cool.
is
That's
cool.
so cool. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
part of my course, it's not just, composition, it's not just music,
Mm,
it's also the tech behind it. And because
mm,
it's technology for film and games, we've played
yeah,
around with Unity, with Unreal, with all these different game engines. We do all the tech side
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
gaming.
cool.
And gaming is usually in reference to video games, but all
Yeah.
of it can be applied to tabletop games
Mm.
when it comes to
So
sound stuff.
yeah. So the
Yeah.
really big difference between sound for a computer game and tabletop games is, in a computer game you have events that arise organically,
Mm,
to which you can tie audio, basically. So you can have footfalls literally and just tie a footstep sound to each footfall,
mm,
and then you just basically need the sort of material you're walking across, and then you can use the audio engine to create the environment. Or you have a crow, NPC sitting in a tree, and sort of the distance that crow is and the direction it is organically created, by the actions of the player.
mm.
And then the crow might have some sort of algorithm about when it crows, and it crows, and then that sound gets played, or there's a sword clash sound, or there's, so the game engine sort of naturally triggers all those sounds. And basically with Sirenscape, we basically essentially do exactly the same thing as a game engine, but we have to kind of come up with our own reason to play any given sound at any given moment.
Mm.
Um, and 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 then that's sort of one aspect. And then so essentially it's more like a movie score, obviously. But then the movie score is totally tied down, and the timings are all perfectly, so we know, when the drama is going to go in this direction or that direction. So then we need to give the dungeon master control in Sirenscape of kind of the contour of the sound, and when we transition from one sound to another, we need to make sure the sound doesn't naturally evolve sort of over 3.5 minutes to reach an earth-shattering peak as the fellowship
Yeah.
comes over the crest of the mountain,
Yeah.
because more likely than not the players are still going to be standing around, sort of trying to work out what spells the wizard was supposed to prepare before the game session started and hadn't yet.
Yeah.
And then the dungeon master might want to suddenly trigger an explosion or some other event or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, Sirenscape is a tool specifically built for tabletop gaming, so that
Mm.
the dungeon master can be that kind of contour controller, and then leave it so that they don't have to worry about triggering individual crows or individual music cues. If you want an environment where a music cue just plays sort of once every few minutes and plays a little bit of music just to keep the atmosphere going,
Mm.
then Sirenscape theoretically takes care of that as well.
Nice. That's really
Mm.
cool. So do you I actually had a question.
Mm,
We're
mm,
going organically into these things. I don't even
mm,
have to bring it up.
mhm,
um, I was I was looking when I was looking at all the D&D sound sets and stuff. You have
mm,
specific sound sets for specific like pre-written
mm,
adventures, like Tomb of
mm,
Annihilation and
mm,
Phandelver, for example. Um, so do you? So I mean, I'm gathering it's like kind of a mix of both. Like you kind of you think of it kind of like a movie, but also kind of like a game in some aspects.
mm,
But do you, because things like Tomb of Annihilation is pre-written, do you think
mm.
of that more linearly of like, oh, this is going to happen at the very beginning, so we need a piece of music for this, or we need sound design for this? Or do you think of it more of a game in
Mm.
terms of like, oh, these are the locations and these are the different
Yeah,
game states that you could be in? Do you think of it like that?
yeah, much more like
Yeah.
that. That's right. Yeah, so we tend to support each location, and
Mm,
we tend to support each encounter. Is kind of the way we think about it. So yeah, there is a little bit of moviness. So at the beginning of um, Dragons of Stormwreck Island, there's definitely an intro kind of movie opening credits kind of feel to it, like that you trigger
mm,
first. So you get kind of a theme song which introduces that main theme, so that we've heard it once, and then we can refer to it musically, sort of over and over
mm.
again throughout the adventure in various different transformed and subtle ways.
Yeah. So like
Uh,
leitmotifs.
that's right.
Yeah.
Leitmotifs are really super big and important thing, absolutely,
Mm,
in movies and very much in Sirenscape and in computer games.
mm,
And so thinking of Dragon's Rest, then after that, there's basically dock, and you basically click on dock, and it just gives you the sound of the dock and seagulls and the slushing water, and an occasional distant sound from the island that kind of creates maybe even subliminally a slight sense of unease or adventure in the future. And then
yeah.
we have, yeah, like going up onto the island and in the temple and in the in the kitchen and in the and then I think we support an NPC, so there's some NPC dialogue there, and then there's the various different locations in the island, and then the various different creatures that people might meet and try and murder.
Yeah.
um, so I suppose, yes, I suppose you're pretty much like a computer game.
Mm,
We're needing to do sound design that the player is going to hear when they enter a certain location. So if a drippy myconoid cave, then we need to create music and sound design and everything to sort of support that,
mm.
and then
Cool.
probably to create combat within that sound. So strip out most of the sounds, still have the essentials of the background that still maintains that sense of immersion in that location, and then add creatures, sounds, and combat music on top of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm,
Cool. That's
mm,
really cool.
mm, mm,
Um Speaking of like the sound design and the music, what's the process like behind the scenes of creating the sounds and the music? You said earlier you have a team of people
mm,
that create. So is it just like a team of people? Do they get like assignments like, oh, we're doing this
mm,
today, or do you just let them play about with stuff and then
mm.
you assign it later? Or
Yeah, so essentially a person will create the content for an adventure.
mm,
Um, or if we're building a standalone sound set, they will create the sound design and music for that location. So if it's a town dock or a black dragon or whatever,
mm,
a lot of the individual content is now broken out of official content. So we tend to contact a lot of the monsters, sort of because we had to support that monster in a particular adventure. It gets supported, gets sound built for it, and then we can then break that out as an individual standalone sound set. So
nice,
yeah, so basically, I will decide that I'm going to do the sound design for Stormwreck Island. So then, all our sound designers are composers and sound designers together. So then I'll
nice,
think about musical themes. I'll compose a main theme, or maybe write a little bit of this, and then I'll basically look through the adventure and discover that that the players arrive at the dock. So then I grab the sounds that I need from a dock. Obviously, a lot of content is already existing in the Sirenscape library already. So some swishing waters and some seagulls and some creaking boards. So I just basically bring in those elements, start them up, balance them up, and then save those presets, those moods,
mm,
those mixes, as dock. And then I'll discover the players need to, travel across the island. So I'll maybe write a bit of travel music and grab the different sounds of the island, and then I might come across something like the Myconoid Caves, and I decide that I need some new sounds that don't exist in Sirenscape yet. So then I will either do some Foley work or produce those
mm,
sounds, or get a voice actor, or download some professional sounds, or go to a sound sharing community and and sort of take some of those things and manipulate them and source them, create the samples, upload them, and then
Mm.
once again set them up in elements, start the element, set the parameters, which is so yeah, how frequently that sound will play, where it's allowed to
Mm.
appear in the environment, what reverb's being applied, what range of volumes it's allowed to be at, all that sort of stuff, and then
Mm.
balance those elements up, save them as a mood. So yeah, basically a sound designer, composer will go through and do that whole process of supporting each of those locations and setting up the whole sound set themselves for a single adventure. And yeah, that's the
Nice.
way we structure it. Yeah.
Nice. That's very
Mm,
cool.
mm,
That's pretty
mm.
cool. Obviously as a student, um I'm always just making music, and I have so
Mm.
many tracks that I'm like, oh, this would be good in this hypothetical scenario in a video game.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
it's just one piece as
Yeah.
opposed
That's
to
right.
like a soundtrack most of the time.
Mm,
Yeah, but yeah, it's pretty cool
mm.
that even for something that's very like customizable, like Sirenscape with the sound packs,
Mm.
you you still create like a whole adventure with it, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. It's basically like creating a soundtrack for an adventure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. It is. That's right. Yeah. And it's so, I mean, the Myconoid cave sound work is essentially what you'd do if you had a movie scene,
Mm,
um, except you just set up all those sounds and then you let it run and sample kind of 4.5 minutes of it, and then you hard code that and put it into the movie scene, add some individual Foley events that actually happen on screen, and then bring in your music tracks. So it's basically the same sort of sound design work, except in Sirenscape it just has to be able to run, by itself, take care of itself, and sort of trigger itself and go indefinitely without
mm,
any loops or repeats or anything. So it's the 15-minute loop kind of thing that you can get on YouTube and all over the place kind of thing. It's essentially the same, except that you can't sort of add a bit of rain or turn off the drips
yeah,
or trigger an individual sound or anything. You can never adjust it. And the worst of all, it's always going to be repeat. It's going to be exactly the same every single time,
yeah,
which is really problematic in terms of the human ear, because we're just so keyed up to find patterns and to recognize repetitions and even to hear stuff that's suspicious or different or unnatural, as
mm,
kind of a warning system.
mm,
Um, and then yeah, that sound design once again is it's essentially like if you were building for a computer game as well, depending how good the sound design was in a computer game.
yeah,
You're setting up different sort of stems of different elements that are in that sound design. You just, in a computer game, you might tie them to specific objects in the scene, so that as the players move through the environment, they bring a certain sound closer to them, and therefore the how it sounds a bit different.
mm,
But in Sirenscape, we don't have the benefit of that. We kind of have had to find different ways of doing that ourselves.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
That's
mm,
really cool.
mm, mm.
Um, uh, I had a question that was relating to that, and I can't find it. That's annoying. Oh, yes. So you're a storyteller yourself. You're a composer. I presume you DM. I mean, you made this
Yes,
software, right?
very much.
Yeah. So with your own compositions and campaigns, I wanted to ask, like, what kind of soundscapes do you tend to lean towards? Like
Mm.
yourself, like, do you tend to lean towards more like sound design type stuff, or do you like orchestral stuff, piano stuff, like both with your own original compositions and with
Mm.
how you would tell the story in a campaign?
Mm. So I'm a real fan. I'm just thinking back to some of the content I've created. I'm definitely a big fan of epic orchestral fantasy. So
Mm,
kind of your Howard Shore kind of thing, Lord of the Rings. And so if you want to hear the music I like, yeah, I suppose maybe I should unlock some content for you. I'm probably the most recent stuff I did was the Stormwreck Island, the Dragons of Stormwreck Island,
mm,
which is based around either orchestral, symphonic, and that sort of has a piratey kind of slightly folky sort of feel to it. And then I love writing music that's essentially aleatoric, so the music that's created from a number of different uh, stems which have randomized elements in them. So I'll often create I wrote a lot of the music in Frost Maiden as well, which was
mm,
basically had sort of a bass element to it which had maybe 20 different bass samples that played different kind of little fragments or things like that. And then maybe there was a mid-range kind of like a piano kind of instrument which played just most of them were quite short little kind of motifs on piano. And then maybe there was a sort of an actual song in there that kind of went for kind of 2 minutes or something. And then there were some pad elements that trigger occasionally with sort of weird sort of shifting chords and things like that. And then I'll often set up those 3 elements to all run all randomized. So
Nice.
you get an aleatoric effect where they combine in unusual and sort of unexpected and satisfyingly kind of bitonal or tritonal kind of ways. And if you're trying to create kind of an atmosphere of unease and kind of tension, sort of continual rolling, ebbing and flowing tension, that works really, really nicely. So I do find it fascinating hearing kind of the random results that the algorithms of Sirenscape are able to throw up from either sort of maybe 50 different musical elements all randomly mixing and matching in obviously ways that are never ever going to repeat ever again.
Yeah.
and then the sound design plays then into that as well. So then you get sort of you might have a wind element in a spooky place, but then you might have bumps and creaks and rat scratches and distant roars and occasional roll of thunder. And because they're all randomized, they all sort of combine in really, really nice and satisfying ways that often combine with the table. Some of the best moments are when the players sort of say that the characters look down the hole down to the next level, and then Sirenscape for some reason will just go and they're like, we decided to go back to town and become florists.
Yeah.
So Sirenscape even gets a bit of a narrative kind of, a bit of narrative control every now and then by just playing something random. Or, a hawker in Burnt Offerings in Rise of the Runelords from for the Pathfinder game. There's a little, I recorded my son saying, Desna's favor, a little boy hawking little cheap religious trinkets, and my players of course latched onto that quick smart and went and like had a whole conversation with the kid and bought one of the fetishes or whatever it was, and and then that becomes a game item which then comes back, and that NPC becomes important. And so I suppose giving Sirenscape a bit of freedom and so that's my sort of tendency. Obviously for combat I've done the same a bit. I do like having so if I have a combat track, because you need to run a combat track continually, which is a big issue. So even computer game battles tend to happen quite quickly, and certainly in movies battles happen very quickly. In tabletop role-playing battles tend to go for ages.
Hours and hours.
That's right. Yeah. So a big combat track in Sirenscape will be kind of the main theme fully fleshed out, and then like just a percussion version of it, and then just the horns, and then a bridge which is new harmonic material, and then another bridge which is completely different again, and then I'll basically allow those to run end to end in a randomized order, so that you're getting sort of trying to maintain that balance of kind of repetition, so that we basically think we're listening to the same song, but then occasionally throwing in a refresher, a harmonic refresher with something completely different, so the ear doesn't get stuck in the same tonality all the time and start to get irritated by it. And same with timbre as well. So you have moments in that track which are really, really big, which has everyone sort of going full bore, and then as I said, you might break it down to just a percussion kind of quite light, and then so that when something else a bit more full comes in, the ear's ready for it and is pleased to have it, rather than just having the same track on and on and on and on and on. So when I play a game like a really old computer game like maybe Neverwinter Nights 1, which I'm a massive fan of. I think maybe it's only per chapter, but it's always the same combat track. It always sounds the same, and it's only like a 45-second loop or something like that. It's pretty amazing to hear that nowadays. You're like, wow, we really just put up with that. That's quite extraordinary, So computer games nowadays obviously do try and ebb and flow and trigger and build depending on the stage of the battle, or hit point status and all that sort of stuff. So
that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? It was me raving on.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. That was really
Good, yeah.
interesting. I like that. Yeah. One of our assignments, like alongside everything else we're doing, alongside our final project and research, one of our assignments is, I think I mentioned this before, Fmod. And yeah, we're learning all about like stuff like that right now, of like switching between different things, how to make a small loop actually feel like it's a much longer piece, and stuff like that. And yeah, I find that stuff fascinating. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I love playing around with it. Now that I know how it's done
Yeah.
in Fmod,
Yeah.
I'm now just playing around with this so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a composer, it's quite fun and fascinating, isn't it? Because you can leverage these sort of techniques to create really interesting compositional results that you don't have to actually manually create every single one yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, which would be time consuming and not very creative in the end. So you can have a rolling drum track that's sort of has 20 different versions of it with all sorts of different things, and it just sounds like a drummer improvising essentially.
Yeah.
Once you go past a certain threshold, the ear stops to notice the repetitions, especially if that's generally fairly uniform. And then over the top of that, you put sort of big percussive sort of surprise elements, which don't even have to be necessarily correctly timed or sync locked. Just so you got sort of and then over the top you just get this kind of thing, over the top of it or whatever, and that creates that kind of improvised feel.
Yeah.
And then once you've got as soon as you get to 3 different elements all improvising, then you've got very quickly you've got an exponential number of sort of variations that will never repeat themselves in the end, which is super cool.
Yeah, perfect for D&D, which could last. Last for hours.
Right.
We had one battle once that lasted like I think 5 hours, and and my DM Adam, he did just put, I think we weren't using Sirenscape at the time because it was one of my first games. I would have insisted on Sirenscape immediately if I knew if I knew about it, but it was at the time I think we were just using the music player that's on Roll20, which has music from Tabletop Sound, but it's a 15-minute loop. Like you said, it's a 15-minute loop. And I was very quickly like, we are in this battle for 5 hours. Can you put a different song on, please?
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. And that was my own. So that was what I first built, was 15-minute loops, for myself. And then very quickly I tried to make them longer. And before long I was sort of trying to mix and drag in various different patterns over an hour track. But of course I'd take the 5 birds that I dropped into Cubase and I'd sort of just copy and then just paste them in anyway and whatever. And I wasn't randomizing them. I was just repeating something I had already. And it's like, and then I'd sort of have to drag them around and scatter them a bit. And then I just thought, this is perfect sort of thing for a computer to do, is to pick a random bird and wait a random amount of time and then play it back. And then of course, you could have the birds closer sometimes, and you have them further away, which would be really, really hard to do in Cubase. You imagine you'd have to have different tracks with different levels of reverb. And then you'd have to sometimes, but that then obviously you're going to create 20 different tracks with 20 different distances of bird with different appropriate reverb settings, and then I'm going to have to balance the volume of the bird for the amount of reverb, because obviously there's going to be some nice sort of exponential sort of scale as the bird moves gradually away. It's like it's going to get very, very tricky to do that kind of manually. So to create that kind of natural variation is actually really, really hard work if you're hard coding sound, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So my research project, essentially what I've done is I've been looking into sound and music and how it can influence the brain. And what I've done is I've told my lecturers I'm going to split D&D music or tabletop music into 2, and I'm going to figure out, I'm going to create like a template, I guess, of what makes narration music, and what makes combat music, regardless of genre, regardless of where you are. I'm going to find those common threads and make a little template, and from that template I'm going to do my own music using that template, basically. So I was wondering, as both a composer and and a D&D person, a tabletop person, is there anything that you look out for, regardless of genre, regardless of what location you're in, Are
Mm,
there any specific things that make a narration music or narration soundscape a narration soundscape, and what makes
mm,
it a combat soundscape,
and
other than just intensity, because
yeah.
that's a bit
And so
obvious.
narration, you mean everything that's in game that's not in combat, as
Pretty
in
much, yeah.
yeah, that's right.
But
Yeah,
that it also isn't roleplay, because roleplay is
yeah,
just between the players, whereas
that's
the
right.
DM is narrating. So
Oh,
when
narrating. Okay, okay,
yeah,
storytelling. Yeah.
yeah.
So I should totally. I'll do I'll do a complete unlock of Sirenscape for you, and then I can probably mention a whole lot of things now, and then you can go and listen to them, which because
Mm,
that'll be the easiest kind of illustration of
mhm.
my thoughts.
Yeah.
And then if I continue to think about it, I can probably send through some sort of further things to point you at.
Mm,
So the cold open of Frost Maiden. So
mhm,
presuming you're going to unlock these,
mhm,
I'll unlock these for you and you can listen yourself. Look, there's a cold open which has like a specific music track with a reading over the top of it,
mm,
and you can either trigger that and then allow the Sirenscape, our voice actor who did it, to do the reading for you of the opening narration, or the
mm,
dungeon master could narrate over the top of that if she liked.
mhm,
Um, then yes, obviously the intro track to Stormwreck Island is specifically designed to have a big orchestral opening, which you wouldn't talk over the top of, and then it does that classic TV or movie thing where then the theme breaks down to just more of the accompaniment, so that
mm,
then it's talkable over.
mhm,
They're classic examples of narration. There's a travel. Let me just look. Is there a travel like wagon journey? I think it's called. Um, Sound set, which is specifically designed with kind of travel-y music
yeah.
for those moments where you're, sort of going from having set up the adventure hook, and then the characters are traveling out to it, and then the dungeon master wants to sort of create a bit of an atmosphere or give the players a bit of an opportunity to connect. So Wagon Journey is another good example of narration music.
Mm,
And then yes, all that um, stuff we talked about, all that sort of threads playing occasional things threadily with gaps in between them.
mm,
It's yeah, definitely an example of so narration music is not filling every hole,
mm,
definitely not playing all the time, has very limited foreground elements, so it's quite important that it doesn't pull focus.
mm,
And that's one of the real problems with using computer game music or movie soundtracks, music's sort of uh, pirated, ripped off games and posted illegally on YouTube. But YouTube doesn't seem to want to bother protecting people's copyright, so people
mm,
just play it off YouTube or whatever. The nature of computer game music or movie music is to pull focus quite specifically at specific times,
mm.
which is a real problem for role playing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so narration music needs to have limited foreground elements that are attractive. Leitmotifs are super important in narration music. So you establish a sort of a mood or a tonality or a melodic fragment, and then you can kind of refer to that to re-trigger emotional associations subliminally,
Mm,
so that the sort of the feeling kind of builds and builds and builds, and then so that when you return to an adventure at a subsequent session, you just need to go back into that music, and suddenly the players are all immersed in that kind of emotional state again.
mm,
Narration music probably needs to be sort of tweakable, and you need to be able to add elements or take away elements or turn it up or turn it down a little bit to kind of sort of ramp up the kind of tension or the feeling or the there's a sound set called Romance, which is really nice, which has sort of literally specifically one of our lovely voice actors complained that there was no romance music in Sirenscape, and so I wrote like 3 songs and put them into 4 songs and put them into a sound set. Um, and then combat music, yeah, combat music's generally has to be maintaining the intensity.
mm,
Um, It can be more foregroundy. It can have kind of explosion moments where there's a sudden intense foreground moment. We always include dramatic stings available in sound sets, or dramatic moments that you can then play over the top of combat music.
mm.
we obviously have the advantage of in a dragon sound set, we can have combat music. You can then obviously you could turn off. What I often do is turn off the automatic dragon roars and definitely turn off the automatic dragon breath weapons, which
Mm.
otherwise will just play every now and then.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the dragon's turn, you just sort of go claw strike, roar, and then suddenly the dragon goes, or if the dragon, actually, God forbid, breathes at the party, and then you just basically trigger the breath weapon, and you get a sound that basically goes over the top of everything and dominates the room for a few seconds
Mm.
uh, while you reach for your dice for the
Yeah.
damage. And combat music, I suppose, yeah, to a certain extent, it's just relatively more static, isn't it? Apart from needing, and then the other issue, sorry, apart from needing to give the ear breaks, which is super super important in Dungeons and Dragons. So
Mm.
you need to then sort of create space, oral space, so that people can get refreshed for a few moments. So we have different versions within long combat tracks. So our combat sequence often will have, I don't know, like almost 20 minutes of different music kind of thing, so that we can kind of cope with the same music coming around definitely every 15 to 20 minutes, because then our
Mm.
ears like, oh, I like this, that's nice.
Yeah.
Um, but you kind of need to go on a journey, along that kind of track. You can't just have the same music track or the same timbre or the same instruments or the same tonality,
Mm.
on and on and on and on, because that very quickly becomes very irritating.
Yeah.
Um, and especially for musicians, you notice technically why that's being irritating, and it becomes sort of conscious, but it'll
Yeah.
still have the same irritating effect on everyone at the table. They just won't necessarily be able to tell you why they're feeling uneasy or or not enjoying the sound of the room quite as much as they might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably if we unlock Sirenscape and then I point you at some of the examples of kind of combat music, and maybe they'll show sort of where my philosophy sits, and then
Mm.
you might ask a couple of questions. Why did you do this? I noticed that you did this with
Yeah.
this track. What's your philosophy, or sort of why behind that? Because there's probably tons of stuff I haven't thought about. Obviously, there'll be a whole lot
Mm.
of stuff I naturally do because I think it's the right way to do it. There's
Yeah.
probably some sensible reason why it's like that and not like something else.
Mm.
Does any of that make
Cool.
any sense?
Yeah, yeah. So what I've gathered from that is like narration music. um, well, yeah. So narration music is kind of subtle. It um, doesn't have a lot of foreground elements. It doesn't have a lot of it doesn't have a lot of foreground elements or things
Yeah.
pulling your ear.
Yeah.
Combat music may have that a little bit because it's
Mm,
intense and you want to drive up that intensity.
mm.
But generally speaking, you just want to keep up that intensity um without letting the ear get bored, really,
That's right.
by
Yeah. Yeah.
changing it up every now and again. Are
Mm,
there when because there are different like genres in Sirenscape. I was looking a lot at the D&D
mm,
sound
mm,
packs, but there's also like things for sci-fi sound packs,
mm, mm, mm,
sound sets and stuff like that. Um, eh, you said that you like orchestral stuff, but is
mm,
there? I'm assuming there's like non-orchestral, more
mm.
maybe more
Yeah.
techno or electronic
Yeah. Lots.
stuff. Do
Lots.
do
Yeah.
the same like philosophies like apply to that kind of thing of like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. That's right. So really, I mean, it's just then a genre difference.
Yeah.
The difference between orchestral and sort of techno wizard fantasy is really just a matter of instrumentation,
Mm.
um, and harmony primarily, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. So timbre and instrumentation and harmony. Um, we even within the orchestral stuff, we obviously hit different kinds of things. Like, so Descent into Avernus has kind of techno rock electric guitar, fully epic fantasy kind of soundtracks,
Mm.
where there's orchestra and electric guitar and drums.
Mm.
The Stormwreck Island is kind of piratey orchestral. Frost Maiden was kind of a bit kind of techno orchestral fantasy kind of stuff.
Mm,
And then obviously, yeah, you get to Starfinder. That was still orchestral, but was it had more and more kind of synth elements.
mm,
And then yeah, we've obviously supported The Crow and Total Recall and Escape from New York and things like that in
yeah.
Everyday Heroes, the modern stuff. And in those ones, we're like literally just emulating the movie soundtracks, the original
Mm,
soundtracks, which we have the license to support, which is super fun. So that's great, taking a genre is,
mm.
and really sort of leaning into that. So
Nice.
yeah, and then obviously in taverns, then you get music interesting. You get in fantasy taverns, you often become far more diegetic. So you really obviously well, yeah, we're having music that the characters are hearing in the world. So then you're
Yeah.
using sort of various different kinds of primitive string instruments and badly played whistles and sort of
Yeah.
tambourines.
Hmm.
Even in the Call of Cthulhu adventure, they come to Australia, so I did an Australian bush band,
Nice.
and I built myself a Lagerphone, which I could play in native instruments in Cubase. Do you know what a Lagerphone is? Just stick with a whole lot of
Yeah.
beer bottle lids nailed onto it, and you can bang it on the ground, and you can whack it, and you can shake it.
Mm.
So I set myself up that in a sampler, and I could play the Lagerphone. I
Nice.
sampled an old ukulele that I had, and sampled every white note on it at sort of 3 different volumes, and played it reasonably badly. And then I set that up on my keyboard so I could play the ukulele. This
Mm.
is quite bad ukulele, strum it, and then play tunes and things, and that was really fun. So yeah,
Mm,
so but basically the same principles probably apply everywhere. Yeah, the need to refresh the ear, the need to have contrasting timbres, the need to have a general unified kind of sound world
mm.
musically. Mm,
Yeah.
mm. I would
Cool.
love a recording or transcript of this interview,
Yeah.
because
I can send it to
we
you.
yeah, that'd be just amazing. Just send, I don't know if you do Dropbox or whatever, just send me a link or whatever.
Mhm.
Because yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff that's really interesting to me. And
Yeah, no, it's very interesting.
we've been thinking about writing some articles and stuff like that about this, and this would be, you're making me think and express ideas in a very clear way. So thank you, or a
Yeah.
relatively clear way. Yeah, yeah, that'd be super cool. Hmm,
Yeah, no, I can send you this,
hmm,
or I could.
hmm.
I'm gonna have to send it to my tutors at some point. It might be easier
Yeah,
just to upload it to YouTube or something.
yeah,
And
just
I
do
could
that.
send you the link. That way, we don't have to do
Yeah, do that, and I'll just do it
Dropbox or
later.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Note that ChatGTP and all those sorts of things can do quite effective transcripts now.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, the Australian accent and the stumbling speech and the talking over each other kind of will cause many mistakes. But at least that can be a super efficient way of getting a whole lot of text out of this sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm, mm.
might do. I might have to check if we're allowed to do that first.
Yes.
But
Okay.
yes.
Well, maybe YouTube transcripts as well, just basically to save you having to type stuff out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. There are
Mm,
many different ways of doing it.
mm,
I'll
mm,
figure it out. But yeah.
mm, mm.
No, that's been cool. I don't think I have. I think I touched on everything.
Okay.
I think I touched on everything that I wanted to say.
Yeah. So I'll give you a
Yeah.
complete unlock as a super siren for like a couple of months or whatever.
Okay,
And that
cool,
will allow
sweet.
you to that will allow you to duplicate what you do is you basically duplicate a sound set,
Mm,
and that gives you a private version of it. And then you'll be able to fold out all the mechanics of how that's playing, and you'll be able to look at an element and see all the parameters. You'll be able to also see the tracks in a music element that are playing and how they're timed to
nice.
overlap, so they can play basically essentially end to end. And then you'd be able to trigger each of those individual music tracks within that element and hear all that stuff that I talked about, like various different
Nice.
orchestrations or versions of things. And that'll give you heaps of info, I reckon.
Nice. Sweet. That
Um,
would be amazing. That would be
yeah,
amazing.
oh,
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Sweet.
And
Thank
then if
you.
you basically email me and say, "Oh, do you have an example of this?" or "You said this, but I'm not really understanding what you mean," or whatever, and then I could say, "Oh, have a look at this. Have a look at this content or this element," and
Yeah.
yeah, mm,
Cool.
mm.
Yeah,
And I'll point
that's so cool.
you, yeah, oh, and I'll point you to tutorials as well, which basically explain the kind of mechanics of the different bits of,
Mm.
of
Oh yeah, I saw
too.
that. The
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
those creation
There's so many
tutorials.
videos I couldn't watch them all,
Yeah,
but yeah.
I know it's not a simple machine. We did a
No.
count the other day of everywhere that the sound gets turned down along the pathway. Um, and
Mm.
it's hilarious. Like, obviously, when you come into Sirenscape, drop a sample in. It has within the element has a volume control of how loud it's, in fact, a minimum and a maximum randomized amount of how loud it's allowed to play.
Yeah.
And then obviously, if you position the sound 20 feet away, it gets softer. If you turn down the volume on an element, it gets softer, obviously. Then you've got the master volume on the Dungeon Master controls. That's a way of making it softer. And then there's like an overall sound set adjustment volume, which makes it softer. And then when the players play it on their player, on their machine, they can make it softer in the master volume there. And then obviously they've got the volume control. So we've like somewhere along the path, there's like a couple of boosts to sort of keep compensating for the fact that everything makes everything's always cutting, because obviously that's all you can actually do to sound along a pathway. So yeah, it's very funny. It's like, wow, it's like all these different, so much complexity goes into making sound just sound fairly normal and it's predictable and natural.
Yeah.
People don't understand.
No, but that's really cool. That's really cool.
So do you have an account on the server under this email address that we've been communicating on?
Yes, I think I did. I can double check. Double check. I did it under my personal email, which is very similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to just email me that? What account would you prefer to have? That personal one?
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah. So just pop me an email once we jump off saying this is the account that I'm using on Sirenscape.
Yeah, cool. I will do.
And I'll activate that.
Sweet. Could you do one more favor for me?
Yes.
My when I told my lecturer, who is my lead for my final major project, that you had emailed me back and that you were going to do this interview, he got very, very excited. So could you say hello to Jamie for me, please?
Hi, Jamie. Can I say more? You're an amazing person, Jamie. I haven't met you.
Yeah, he's very cool. He's very cool. He has like he like talks about how he plays Baldur's Gate all the time. It's very fun.
Cool. I'm playing Baldur's Gate at the moment with my 2 kids. So we're doing a party of 3. And Shadowheart. Why wouldn't you have Shadowheart in your party? And
fair enough.
Yeah, we're going together. So we're playing it all the way through just as the 3 of us, which is super cool. So we can get that multiplayer experience, and then we'll.
Nice.
I presume you meant the computer game. Did you Baldur's Gate 3?
Baldur's Gate 3.
And then we're gonna play it ourselves and take all the pathways that we didn't take and have more NPCs in our party and everything. So so that's lots of fun.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Music and obviously the voice acting in Baldur's Gate is just exceptional.
And amazing. It's brilliant. It's amazing. I love Gale. Gale is my NPC of choice. I love Gale. He's so funny. I got to that bit where he was like, "You licked a spider. Are you okay?"
I haven't heard that because we've never had Gale in our party, you see. So
really? Because you're playing with
3 of us. We can only have one NPC.
Yeah.
And my daughter's enjoying having Shadowheart in. So I've got all that in my future, which is very, very exciting. So we've actually get to have a whole complete new playthrough with all the NPCs interacting with each other, and it's quite fun.
Yeah, when it gets to the option to lick a dead spider, do it. It's hilarious. Okay. It's hilarious. Do it with Gale in your party. It's so funny.
Yeah, okay, good.
It's so funny.
And he doesn't just want to steal your magic items like all the time.
No, it's not that many times. And you don't use most of the magic items anyway. Yeah. So it's like, and especially like considering what character you're playing and what class and subclass you're using. Like I'm playing a monk. My character is a monk. She's my friends made me this. It's fantastic. Big, but this is Flynn.
Is that model not from the game though? Is it? That's like
No, that's just I play Flynn all the time. Flynn is my character for everything. So I play her in my campaign. I play her in Baldur's Gate. Everything. So yeah, so I'm playing a monk, but like half of the magic items are for like spells and stuff, which monks don't have many spells.
Millions of scrolls and absolutely boots of the lightning boots that just like murder you every time you go near water and stuff. And like, you can eat that. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sure you have places to be. It's yes, I do. I'm gonna go and grab a coffee since it's 10 a.m. now on a Tuesday. So,
10 a.m. Enjoy your coffee. Thank you so much for making the time for this. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So,
cool.